Hi guys, so today I'm going to be presenting on the two articles that were assigned for today. The first was Bolter and Grusin's two chapters on remediation, and then I'm also going to be talking about Lisa Nakamura's article on identity tourism. So the chapter starts off by talking about The Wire, which is a concept that's introduced in the movie Strange Days. And basically what it does is it records and captures sensory experiences and basically can play back and transfer these sensory experiences directly to the subconscious. So basically, The Wire is essentially a contemporary virtual reality and a completely unmediated visual experience. At the same time, Strange Days sort of demonstrates the double logic of remediation in that remediation seeks to multiply media, while at the same time it's trying to get rid of and erase all signs of mediation. So remediation is basically the incorporation or representation of one medium in another medium. So live television news programs where they're trying to capture live footage or get in on the action, and also like live webcams, 24/7 webcams. Those are examples of remediation. So immediacy, there are two concepts to remediation. The first is immediacy. The medium itself should disappear and then leave us in the presence of what is represented. And then hypermediacy acknowledges the acts of representation and then makes them visible for people to interact. So basically, for like a 24/7 webcam of Mount Everest, the webcam itself is an example of immediacy because it's trying to present the content and sort of disregard the medium itself. But then hypermediacy is the ads on the side, the chat options, customizable displays. Those are examples of hypermedia. So they go on to say that transparency, immediacy, and hypermediacy are interdependent. So they use flight simulation as an example. So in flight simulators, the immediacy of the experience is pure hypermediacy. So basically that means that we know that none of it is real. We know that the simulation is just a simulation, yet the simulators are designed in a way to emulate the design of a cockpit, all the controls of the cockpit of an actual plane, and they're trying to emulate that reality as accurately as possible. So there's a good quote on page 53 where they say, transparent digital applications seek to get to the real by bravely denying the fact of mediation. Digital hypermedia seek the real by multiplying mediation so as to create a feeling of fullness, satiety of experience which can be taken as reality. Both of these moves are strategies of remediation. So there are two major paradoxes of remediation. The first is that hypermedia seeks to achieve the unmediated. So basically, we're aware of the process of creation, but at the same time, we're also aware of the process of viewing. So in this sense, the excess of media that we're exposed to comes together and then becomes the authentic experience. So High Modern Art is an example of this. It promises the authenticity of the experience of the viewer, the viewing of the art, but at the same time, it also emphasizes the process of creation, the actual putting of paint on the canvas. And then the other paradox is that transparent digital technologies always end up being mediations while denying mediation. So transparent technologies are always trying to erase signs of mediation, but at the same time, they're defined by the standards of the media that they're trying to erase. So there are three functions of remediation. The first is remediation as the mediation of mediation. So basically, any act of mediation is dependent on another. So they use the term mediatization to explain this. So basically, media becomes systematically dependent on one another, and also on prior media in order to establish meaning and cultural significance. And they go on to say that no constituent, like subject, language, or an object, ever appear in its purest form separate or completely isolated from other constituents. They go on to say that culture is therefore the combination of a variety of different constituents. The second is remediation as inseparability of mediation and reality. So all mediations are real as artifacts in our mediated culture. So we have to acknowledge that all media remediates the real, and also that there's no getting rid of the real. So modern art is an example of this. So modern art isn't about the world, it's about itself, and it emphasizes the reality of both the act of creation and also the painting itself. So it's regarded as real because it refuses to be realistic or take on the connotations of realistic, and also acknowledges the act of mediation in the process. And then there's remediation as reform. So remediation in other contexts could mean bringing up the grades of a lagging student, or to restore or repair a damaged ecosystem. But in media studies, it's used to express the way in which a medium reforms and improves another media. So, for example, email is an improvement from traditional mail, and TV on mobile devices allows for greater convenience rather than having to lug around an actual TV with you. So, in the US, collective salvation and social change is thought to come from technology. So, when we think of remediation of older media, we also think of social reform. So then Lisa Nakamura's article, she talks about how the technology of the internet sort of offers this new, or these unprecedented possibilities for communicating with each other, and how we're able to take on different identities and different roles and representations that were previously impossible. So she uses the example of Lambda Mu, which is a role-playing site, where users create their own avatars and create their own names. And there is no option, there's no mandatory option for racial background, but a lot of people decide to include sort of a racial background in their description. And so basically she tries to explore this, and also she tries to see why people choose certain roles, and then how these new identities are formed. But in particular, she focuses on people who take on Asian personas in Lambda Mu. So the vast majority of the Asian characters that are portrayed are from popular TV shows and film. And so they're sort of like the stereotyped orientalized male. And because of this, the orientalized theatricality is therefore a form of identity tourism, because it allows for people from other racial backgrounds to cross over racial boundaries and sort of obtain the perspective or take on the identity and roles of someone that, or of a race that they aren't. So identity tourism allows for non-Asian users to see through the eyes of the other, but at the same time, the choice of the Asian male stereotype subsequently enforces these stereotypes. And she goes on to say that basically the internet is a vacation from our fixed identities. And then she also goes on to talk about the Asian female representation in Lambda Mu, and how it's doubly repressive because it not only mixes the orientalized stereotyping, it also mixes in virtual sex and performance. Then she quotes Cheshire as saying, "In spite of the claims that everyone is the same in virtual worlds, access to technology and necessary skills will effectively replicate class divisions of the rest of reality in the virtual spaces, and will tend to reinforce existing inequalities and propagate already dominant ideologies." So she basically goes on to say that the internet has the potential to take on completely new identities, but at the same time, people just decide to enforce existing stereotypes rather than creating an entirely new world. So my questions for you are, first is, do you think society is getting closer to complete immediacy with the rise of 3D and film and TV, or will immediacy and hypermediacy become increasingly interdependent? And then Bolter and Grusin mentioned that all new media is remediation of older media, in which the flaws and unfulfilled promises of older media are subsequently fulfilled. Do newer forms of media, such as social media, remediate older forms of media? If so, how? And then, is identity tourism inherently discriminatory, or is it possible for us to assume the identity of a different race without stereotyping? So yeah, that's it. I'm looking forward to your answers. Thanks.